Introverts are typically not categorized as the most social creatures. They're often seen as socially awkward, they come across as shy, they're like hermits. We typically don't see them as having the best social skills. Now, I am socially anxious, and I'm also an introvert. I've been there. I struggled for majority of my life connecting with people, being social with people, coming out of a conversation and saying, wow, that actually went really well. That never used to happen for me. I was the type of person who would think about that social interaction for weeks, saying things like, I sounded stupid, I shouldn't have said that, I should have said this instead. I know what it's like, but I've come a long way from then. So in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about the 5 social skills that every introvert needs, and the 5 social skills that will make you confident, attractive, and approachable. Now, before we get into the video, I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Bridget. On this channel, you guessed it, I talk a lot about introverts, I talk about social anxiety, general anxiety, the books I'm reading. So if any of that interests you, make sure you go check out some of my other videos as well. Now, with that being said, let's get into the video. Tip number 1. Something that I've been exploring a lot recently, and I've mentioned in the past couple of videos. Arguably the best way to have a good conversation with somebody is to be interested in them rather than trying to make yourself appear interesting. And this is from a book I'm currently reading, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He says the number 1 way to be a great conversationalist is to just be genuinely interested in that person. And the times that I've had great conversations with friends and with people I meet is always when I appear to be interested in what they're actually saying. No one wants to talk to someone who's just going to spend the entire time talking about themselves. No one wants to be in that conversation. When I talk to someone who's genuinely interested in what I have to say, I'm going to want to keep talking to that person. And for introverts, this is a great social skill to have because we don't like to talk a lot. And we are great listeners. So having this at our disposal is a very effective way to communicate with people. Now, being interested in someone is not the same thing as being a good listener, which is actually point number 2. Being interested is actually, asking follow-up questions, making a lot of direct eye contact, actually want to know more about what they're saying. A lot of times we try to focus on that aspect when it comes to being sociable, being the interesting person, being confident, being attractive, being approachable. But really that's not the kind of person that people seek out when they're trying to have a good conversation. People seek out the person that's going to listen to them. So be interested. Number 2 is being a good listener, which is something that us introverts are already very good at. Just being a good listener isn't going to get you far in conversations. And when it comes to social skills, being a good listener does also entail asking those follow-up questions, asking them to talk more and more and more, making them feel important, making them feel heard. And I find that sometimes, or at least I used to be in this pattern of thinking, I'm always trying to, think about the next thing that I'm going to say. Right? What can I say in return that's going to make me sound interesting, that's going to make me sound smart? I'm thinking about the next thing. So although it appears that I'm listening, I'm actually in my head thinking about, okay, how can I make this conversation better? What can I say to make this person like me or to make them feel like I'm actually contributing to the conversation? And when we do this, we're not actually listening. And therefore, we can't really contribute. If I'm half listening to someone when they're talking about something and I ask a question that's totally irrelevant or totally just seems like I definitely didn't listen to what they say, they're not going to want to keep talking to me. And I think a lot of the times I used to appear that way. Either I was standoffish or I was rude or mean or inauthentic with someone. And it's because I was doing that. I was so focused on how I would appear, how I would look, how I could make this person want to be around me more or think that I'm good at conversating because I never used to be that way. But when I'm thinking so much about doing it, I can't do it. So part of it is about letting go of what you want to get out of it and instead think about what you want to put into it. And when you have that mindset, almost always you will have a good conversation, unless that person themselves is rude. So be a good listener. Actively contribute. Tip number 3, this is something I'm actually currently working on because I'm so bad with this. Remembering people's names and addressing them by their name when you're having conversation with them, whether you've met them before or you're meeting them for the first time. A helpful tip that I like to do when I meet new people is when they say their name, I will say it right back to them. Nice to meet you, blank. Or when I'm sending a text, instead of now saying, hey, it's blah, hey, their name is blank. I think part of the reason why I'm so bad with names is because I had this weird thing when I was younger. I think it, had something to do with the social anxiety, had something to do with selective mutism that I had. I almost felt awkward saying that person's name. And I don't even, it's such a weird thing to describe. I would never say people's names. I would rarely even say my own name. And I think that kind of morphed into me just telling myself, oh, I'm just so bad with names. And so I lived that reality. I didn't take the time to actually remember people's names because I just kept telling myself, I'm bad with names. But the truth is, I just never really put the energy into actually trying to learn someone's name. So think about the times when people address you by your name, right? When people address you by your name, instead of just saying, hey, it makes that person feel seen. And in Dale Carnegie's book, he actually talks about this. I forget where he found this quote or where it was from originally, but it was something along the lines of the sweetest sound that someone will ever hear in any language is their own name. And I really do think that's so true. So this is something I haven't quite mastered yet, but I am really working on it because I think it really is such a small thing that can actually make the conversation and your interaction go that extra mile. So remember people's names. Tip number 4, be comfortable, be relaxed. There is nothing worse when you're so tense in a conversation and you have so much built up energy and expectations in that conversation. For a couple of reasons. You clearly appear to be tense. I can see it in your body language. I can see it in your lack of eye contact. Again, you're not going to be actually present to the conversation. When you're thinking about how much your hands are sweating, or if your cheeks are getting red, or if you're shaking a little bit, you're bouncing your leg, you're doing anything you can to distract yourself. I've been there countless times. And I can tell you when I'm in that state, I'm not present to the conversation. I'm not going to be listening. I'm not going to be asking those correct follow-up questions. I'm not going to be genuinely interested in what they have to say because I'm thinking about my own shit. Being comfortable and relaxed before you go into a social setting, before you know you're going to be in a place where you're going to have to interact with people. And another thing with that is having those expectations. I've talked about this so many times on this channel in so many videos. When I have high expectations about an event I'm going to, or if I'm meeting a specific person that I've been anticipating for a long time, or if there's some kind of network event, it doesn't really matter. If I'm meeting a new person, I spend such a great deal of time building up those expectations. So if I met them before, okay, these are all the things I did last time, so this is what I have to do first time. And if I haven't met them at all, ooh, the expectations are even higher. How can I appear? They've never met me before, so I gotta appear smart and authentic and genuine and happy and friendly and outgoing and whatever. And when you build those expectations up, same thing happens. You're not going to be present. And even worse, if those expectations aren't met throughout the conversation, well, you're gonna feel like crap after. You're gonna feel like you didn't do a good job, and you're doing yourself a disservice by setting those expectations. When you're meeting somebody, you shouldn't expect anything. If you're being genuine, you shouldn't expect anything, right? If you're actively listening, you shouldn't expect anything. And I think that's what tripped me up for so long, because I thought if I set expectations, it would help me achieve those expectations. But in reality, when I set the expectations, I almost never followed through with any of them. And it just made me feel like garbage after. It made me feel like not wanting to try again. Whereas when I go into something big where I'm a little bit nervous about it and I've been anticipating for it for a while, I just try to be like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who I'm going to meet. I don't know what the conversations are going to be like. So I'm just going to be present. Whatever comes up, and I'll navigate it as I go along. There's no point in thinking of the worst case scenario, even the best case scenario, if it's never going to happen. So get comfortable with yourself, relax, and show up as you are. 99% of the time, the problems that arose during a bad conversation or a bad interaction were problems that I created in my head. So remember that next time. Tip number 5 is a little bit more hands-on, I guess you could say, and just something to have in your back pocket when you do go into conversation and you find yourself frozen in fear and hating small talk and having awkward silences with people. I like having go-to conversation starters. So a lot of the things that I will typically talk about, if it's like a small talk situation and there's an awkward silence and you kind of have to fill in the gap, I like talking about like things that I've seen recently, podcasts that I've listened to, books that I'm currently reading, or shows that I'm watching, or something that happened in the news, like pop culture, really anything. I like to fill my bucket with enough things that can be, relatable to different types of people that I can have at my disposal when I go into those conversations and I'm like, okay, now what? And it's almost like a safety net for me because I do hate small talk, like most introverts do. And it's just something to ease my mind so I don't run into those awkward things. Because when it does become awkward, then again, I get in my head, I'm like, well, am I the awkward one? Am I being standoffish? Am I being weird? Am I being awkward? And I start like racking my brain with like these things. The anxiety sets in and then it crashes. So if I have enough things in my bucket to talk about, random things that doesn't really matter, then I don't run into that situation. You can have specific go-to questions prepared if you like. Sometimes I do that, and other times I'm just like, no expectations. I have, random things, and I'm not going to think about it too much. In other scenarios where I do like to prepare those specific things, sometimes something weird or funny or I don't know, will happen to me throughout the week, or I'll think about something that happened to me last month. If I haven't seen somebody in a while, I'll, like on the way there, I'm mentally preparing that conversation. I'm having that conversation with myself in my head as I'm driving to see that person. Sometimes it gets said and sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes I find myself just practicing conversations in general, so I get the flow going. I even do this a lot prior to filming a video. I'll sit and I'll talk to the camera. It might be what I'm going to say in the video, and I might say stuff to the camera that will never get said in the video. But it's about getting into that flow state of conversating and having the words flow easily and authentically and correctly, because I do stutter. I do stumble over my words. I do forget what I'm talking about sometimes. And you guys will probably see that throughout my videos. I'll go on a tangent and I'm like, okay, what was I talking about? Having those go-to conversation starters, practicing your conversations if that helps you, if you're anything like me, and just being prepared at the end of the day to have that conversation, to be yourself, but also to be prepared. So these are things that have helped me develop my social skills. These are things that have made me feel confident when having conversations with people. And I feel like this would be very helpful for those of you who are maybe not just introverted, but also somewhat socially anxious. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you again for watching today's video. I hope you found it helpful and useful as always, and I will see you next time.